You're tuned in to the Zelos podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder, and I've got another Perform Better presenter on this week. That's Amber Kivett, experiencing the Magik. She's all about Kivett Kinetic Solutions. We're going to dive in just a moment, but be sure to check out performbetter.com. Their 3-day summits in Long Beach, California, Providence, Rhode Island, Chicago, Illinois are something you don't want to pass up. As well as the NSCA National Conference this year is going to be in Kansas City, Missouri, July 16th to the 19th. That's something you're not going to want to pass up either. Tons of information and networking. Speaking of information, if you want to go to my website, rockysnyder.com, aside from the podcast archives, we've got blogs, online content, online courses, and more. And otherwise, you can go to Satanta College for courses if you want a master's degree. You get 10% off tuition with the code RS10. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Click the subscribe button. Here we go. Well, Amber, I can't thank you enough for coming on Zelos podcast. You know, it's always good to meet the Perform Better presenters that I have yet to have the privilege of sitting in your session. And it looks like this year we're gonna be missing each other again. But I know somewhere down the road it's gonna happen. We'll be face to face. But first, welcome to the Zelos podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's such an honor to be here with you.
Well, how did it come about? I mean, let's just jump into Perform. Well, before we get into Perform Better, actually, how about if the listening audience just understands who Amber Kivett is, where you come from, what you do, and so on?
Yeah, so I have a couple of nicknames that have been handed to me through the last 25 years. The two big ones is the Gatekeeper of Dreams and the Magic Lady, Magik Lady, and I'm known for magic hands. But the Gatekeeper of Dreams, he or she who has good health and has no pain has 1,000 dreams, and he or she who doesn't only has one, and I have the power to give them their dreams back by taking away their pain instantly, in 90% of cases in 1 to 3 appointments. I am in sports medicine, so I bridge the gap full circle in providing services in sports medicine, human performance, mental coaching, and body work. So truly mind, body, spirit, and I catch a lot of the gaps where the doctors are falling short with getting patients back through physical therapy, or the physical therapists only have so many sessions, or it's just missed altogether. But I work with professional athletes, I work with celebrities, work with the general population, senior citizens. We are all just a bunch of vehicles out there getting one place to another, and I'm known for upgrading the Buick to the Camaro Super Sport, then to the Corvette, then to the Ferrari, and there's only so many Ferrari mechanics in this world, and I'm one of them. So that's what I'm known for, is instant pain relief and bringing out the best in each person. But I meet most people because of pain, and pain comes in physical, mental, spiritual, emotional forms. And I have learned through my skill set in sports medicine as well as in human performance how to look within the body using intuition and letting the body talk to me. Most people want me to give them what they want. And I tell them, if I give you what you want, you're not going to leave with what you intended for. So I'm going to give your body what it needs. They give you a little bit of what you want, and we're all really happy living life on a totally different level. So, but I've got a degree in athletic training from Purdue University. So that's what kind of got me involved with working with Drew Brees and a lot of other incredible athletes through the years. And then graduated in 2002, met Todd Durkin in 2008 at Perform Better, but was in a really bad car accident in 2005, just 3 years after graduating. And that left me learning life all over again with 8 spinal injuries, head trauma, and some fibromyalgia, which is now, what most would consider an autoimmune disease where the body attacks itself. And back then, nobody knew anything about CTE. Nobody knew much about how to manage concussions. You just got your bell rung. You don't have, good memory. You just sleep it off. Nobody really understood what to do with a 27-year-old with 8 spinal injuries. And so I just kind of became a guinea pig to a lot of doctors and, a lot of pharmaceutical companies, to be honest with you. But found my own way after firing everybody and starting over. And I'm completely pain-free today, living my youngest life as the years roll forward. So,
What were your spinal injuries? What did you sustain? You said 8 of
yeah,
them.
8. Yeah. So I had 5. Well, technically, it depends on how you look at it. 5 cervical disc injuries. So I had 5 cervical disc bulges, 3 lumbar disc bulges, 1 lumbar herniation at L5S1. And then I had what they called a severe spinal strain, in which my entire nervous system just got really pissed off and went into lockdown mode, to where I could not move much of anything. If I tried to walk, I was taking steps maybe 2 inches to 3 inches at a time. Could not roll over in bed. I was about as close to vegetarian state without having a spinal cord injury as one could be, because my nervous system was so upregulated from being the medical coordinator for the World Swimming Championships with very short notice of planning, and just working, 50, 60 hours a week to get that event underway, and just stretching myself too thin, trying to be someone to everybody, but taking care of myself. And then got impacted between a Suburban and a full size van. Took three impacts. The second one knocked me out, drove back into the third. And all of that, all at the same time of being in a new marriage of only 9 months. So just trying to live life. And the
Wow.
body doesn't like that. So
Okay.
I had
So
no short-term memory for 6 months.
crazy, not crazy, understandable.
Crazy,
Oh
cray
my
cray, totally
gosh.
crazy.
But wow. Okay. So oftentimes we have somebody that sustains an injury and they go on this learning journey, educational, and it could come from all sorts of directions, not just a traditional path, but it could be Eastern, Western philosophies. It could be Amazonian rainforest. It could come from all over the place. I'm curious though, before your accident, were you exploring modalities of restoration to the physical frame or to the mental body or emotional state? Or was this something that culminated after your own personal experience?
Yeah, no, I mean, I had just sat for my CSTS exam. I had just passed my national board exam as an athletic trainer. I was off and running, doing a lot of sports performance, trying to develop a new sports performance department in a hospital organization for outreach athletic training for high schools. But I had a lot of experience working with elite swimmers. So I was USA medical swimming provider, USA diving medical provider. Just I already understood body work a lot from traveling with Purdue Swimming and Diving back in my undergraduate years. We worked with massage therapists on the sidelines a lot, so I learned a lot from observation of some of the best. One of my favorite mentors is Michael Phelps, massage therapist. I mean, I worked with him on the pool deck for a week, and working with Olympic medalists for that championship. So I was already on path. I already understood foam rolling. That back then we were using PVC pipe for foam rollers, which you know not to do anymore, right? We use that for weightlifting instead, right? um, but no, I understood foam rolling. I understood. I mean, the tiger tails had just started coming out about that time, or the stick had just started coming out. There's just
Yeah.
a lot of things that had just started coming out. I already understood a lot about fascia because I started studying fascia in the late 90s after being in 5 car accidents in my high school years and survive those. Because I mean, when you're a teenager back in the 90s, you're resilient because we don't have phones and TV and social media and computers. I mean, we didn't even have our own computer back then. So back then you're resilient, but this left me into a whole different situation. I was just covering high school athletic teams and covering high level events on the side, as just a special interest opportunity. And so I understood how to work along with professional athletes that were just, I mean, they hadn't even started dabbling. Michael Phelps wasn't even dabbling in cupping back then. You didn't even hear about it. I didn't experience it until it saved my life in 2005, 2006. So yeah, so I'm going to say that God, I like to say that adversity is God's idea of resistance training for us. We don't choose adversity; it happens for us. But why do we do resistance training in human performance? We do it to get stronger, to get better, so that we can carry ourselves forward with intention. But we would never choose the adversity that we're thrown into because we're never strong enough in our own mindset, nor do we want the inconvenience of the time to being able to go through it. But when you're in it, you have no choice but to figure it out. And
Yeah.
so as the saying is, if you don't choose change, change chooses you, and you're always qualified to help a past version of yourself. And so I like to say that God puts us through adversity in order to equip us and educate us and give us the opportunity to make a difference in the future when we're called to serve.
Fantastic. And so you have had quite a bit of adversity, obviously, just from the the brief summary of what's been going on, 5 car accidents during high school, and of course the massive occurrence that occurred between those two vehicles, leaving you with major spinal injuries and concussion, obviously, and everything else you just named. So obviously you went through the traditional Western approach, which is heavily involving pharmaceuticals to the point where you were on some major heavy stuff. What was, just if you don't mind sharing, what was
Hmm.
the final straw? What was that moment that you just, enough was enough? Were you sick and tired of being sick and tired? What was it?
Yeah. So, what you haven't had a chance to read about me is I'm a survivor of sexual trauma from my childhood,
Uh-huh.
and I was also gang raped in high school. So, when you have been through physical sexual trauma and you don't talk about it, that hibernates in the connective tissue, which continues to manifest more and more problems when you actually have another trauma, a physical trauma that sets in. When you have had those situations happen to you, and you don't have control over your mind because somebody's taken it away from you, the last thing you want is to lose control over your mind. And what do pharmaceuticals do? They take control over your mind. So I was taking 23 pills a day between, that was about the time, like I said, they really didn't understand as much about concussion management, CTE protocols as they do now. They didn't understand about fibromyalgia. It was just a garbage can diagnosis back then. It was not considered autoimmune back then, in which the body attacks itself. And they didn't understand depression or hormone regulation. And when you have a head injury, certain hormones stop working. So I went through menopause at the age of 27, hormonally speaking, because of a head injury,
Wow.
and truly aged fast. But it all came down to the doctors were experimenting with me because back then Neurontin was, which is called gabapentin now, was a clinical trial for nerve pain off label. And it is gabapentin Neurontin is an anti-seizure drug used for epileptic behavior. I was prescribed it on very, very high levels to see, like, again, as a clinical trial, how it worked off label. And so I had no short term memory for 6 months, which covered up the head injury. We didn't even know I had a head injury until 6 months after the accident had happened, when I saw a third neurologist to figure out why certain things were not changing for me. I had become narcoleptic, so I would fall asleep just trying to do everyday life. And then I would be up all hours of the night because medication changes your circadian rhythm. And I'm not living life outside because my whole identity has changed. And I was humiliated from gaining 50 pounds of weight from medication, from just medication and fluid in my body from not being able to move a whole lot. So, and not moving. Movement is medicine, motion is lotion. The doctors with eight spinal injuries told me not to move. Stay in bed, take a pill. Like, that's what I was told to do. And back then, Oxycontin and the narcotics were on the uprise, and the doctors were making, where we're getting rewarded for prescribing a lot of that stuff. So I was taking anywhere from 8 to 10 Percocet a day. I was taking two every 4 to 6 hours. That wasn't numbing the eight spinal injuries, which is, if you've never had nerve pain, is the most debilitating pain you can imagine. I've had children. It is the most debilitating pain imaginable. You can't even explain it. It'll make you go mentally crazy. So I was taking those. Those weren't working as much as what I needed. So then they were having me overlap with tramadol, which is also a controlled substance, which was not a controlled substance back then. So I
Oh
was
my
taking
God.
tramadol, Percocet. I was taking Neurontin for nerve pain. I was taking Cymbalta, which was a clinical trial for depression, for chronic pain, but it was one of the few antidepressants that didn't destroy libido. And being only married for 9 months, like, that's the last thing you want to do is kill your libido. And then I was taking muscle relaxers. So I was taking Flexeril, which made me act like a clown. So I was 23 pills a day is what I was taking. And I was not taking vitamins. Nobody wanted to tell me to take vitamins. And because I had stopped producing hormones, it wasn't until I couldn't get weight off. Like, I just wanted to lose 5 pounds because I was approaching 200 pounds and I was married at 140 pounds. And this is all medicinal weight gain. Like, antidepressants make you fat. So they, like, change everything. And when you go from not being able to move, and I'm trying to eat because that's the only thing that tastes good, it's the only good I felt, but I didn't develop an eating problem. I just not moving. And when you're consuming calories that you're used to consuming and you're not moving, you get you gain weight. So I went from like a size 8 to a size 14, which changes your identity. And then you see people in public and they look at you and like, whoa, what the hell happened to you? are you pregnant or when's the baby due? And I wasn't pregnant. Like, I'm just large and feeling totally different. I don't even, you wouldn't even recognize a photo of me from back then. But yeah, so
Unbelievable.
the turning point was I hallucinated one day, and my husband at the time happened to be home and asked me who I was talking to because we were the only two people in the room, and I was hallucinating two people and my friends who happened to be in the corner in the room in my imagination, but I was being overdosed. I was being overdrugged, and what happens when you're taking too much medication? You hallucinate. You go off into la la land. And so when he told me I was hallucinating and I came out of it, it scared the crap out of me, and I didn't want to lose my mind. I didn't want to not be in control. And when I realized that I hadn't remembered certain things, when a family member happened to be helping to take care of me, and I didn't remember her being there at like months before, but I was walking better. I learned to walk normal gait pattern in an underwater treadmill after being lowered into the tank with a chairlift because I couldn't walk down the steps into the water. So it was a humiliating process, being a healthy 27-year-old woman who is loving life and living at the top of her mountain, to being a nobody. And you figure out really quick, when something happens to you, the world doesn't stop. Everybody keeps going without you. So you figure out who your real friends are and who really actually cares. But that was the turning point. Was I hallucinated one day, and after going through sexual abuse and after not wanting to lose control over my body or my mind and not knowing what had happened to me, that's when I said, I don't want the drugs anymore. I will take the game ready. I will go through 25 pounds of ice a day, but we got to find another way. And that's when we found out I had a head injury because I had debilitating headaches that I couldn't tolerate when I went off, when I eased myself off the medication. And that's what led me to finding an Asian physician, who was, knew that I was taking a lot of medication. When I went in to see him a week, I tried to cut off all the medication cold turkey. You can't do that. Not good idea
Yeah.
with 23 pills a day.
No.
It made me
So
very sick.
when you say an Asian doctor, are you referring to not only his ethnicity, but that he infuses traditional Chinese medicine into his practice, or what do you mean
Yeah,
by
no,
that?
no, he's a Korean doc. He was born in Korea, and his father is one of the greatest physicians in Eastern medicine. Doesn't live in the United States, but he had learned a lot of what he does from his own father. And he happened to be in Indianapolis, and I just wanted acupuncture because I had a headache that was so debilitating that the emergency, the Imitrex migraine medication, the Topamax, all these drugs that are supposed to help with headaches wasn't working because I didn't have headaches or migraines from hormones or from like going through things. I had a head injury. I had a concussion, and you don't take those kind of drugs for a concussion. So I ended up in going to his office, and I was still taking a lot of these medications because you can't stop taking them like that. He had me do he had me didn't do drug testing, but he did urinalysis, saliva testing for cortisol levels, and blood work. And I was a month away from having to go through dialysis from organ failure. And I didn't even know I was that close. And he
Wow,
told me, he said,
so
you
so
are,
toxic.
yeah, he said, the doctors are killing you. You've got to get off of these medications. And I said, that's why I'm here. I want help. And I said, I just have these debilitating headaches and I just want them to go away. I don't even care about the nerve pain. I just don't, I couldn't be awake. I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't read a book. I couldn't do a puzzle. And I was isolated. I'm a newlywed by myself. I couldn't work. So I just wanted to be able to go outside and walk around. But when you have a head injury in the sunlight and your equilibrium is off, if you've been in bed for months, like your equilibrium is off. So he put me through an herbal detox for about a month where I was able to taper off of taking certain medications immediately and started doing acupuncture immediately on me. And that's when he introduced me to wet cupping. And wet cupping is a practice in which they cut your body to make you to bleed. And then they use fire to transfer the heat to the body to create the suction in the glass. And when they make contact with that cup after they've cut you to bleed, it suctions up so much that the blood leaves through those cuts into the cup. And when he started cupping me with wet cupping, my blood was chocolate brown. And that's how bad it was. And your blood's supposed to be bright red. Mine was dark brown. And I felt like I was on fire because I have fibromyalgia at the time, and which is a chronic excruciating pain syndrome where your body is mistaken for something being wrong with you, but there's nothing wrong with you. It is a miscommunication between your pain receptors and what your brain is actually receiving. So I cried. I cried for that therapy session with him, and I did 12 weeks of those types of appointments until he cut me, and my blood was bright red, and I didn't feel the same kind of pain. I was able to tolerate it. I didn't cry. And then he started doing dry cupping, and that's when I was able to start moving better. And it wasn't until he still had me on a couple of the pain medications. So I was still taking tramadol, but I wasn't taking Percocet. I was no longer taking the gabapentin. I was no longer taking the antidepressants. He told me to start moving, which I did little by little as best as I could until I got to the point where I could I could get on a stairmaster and I could do 30 minutes of stairmaster, but I could not walk up or down a flight of stairs because I had to overcome gravitational energy resistance in my lungs. So I
Mm.
didn't have the stamina in my body to be able to go up and down stairs with control, but I could get on a stairmaster for 30 minutes. And I could ride a recumbent bike, but I would go numb. So I'd have to get up and walk around in order to get more blood flow going, and then I would get back on and go again. So my job became just going to the gym and doing these workouts by myself because I was qualified to train myself. I knew what to do. I just didn't do it because the doctors told me not to. And the more I
And
did, the better I felt.
how long was this process from the moment that you got with this doctor in Indianapolis to where the point where you were feeling yourself again?
It took a total of 2 years for me to go back to work in a functional capacity that I didn't have to be afraid of whether I could do it or not. And then when it came down to from the moment that I met him to the time that I walked up and down a flight of stairs without one pain pill was 4 months.
Beautiful.
So
Okay,
the accident was May 21st of 2005. I met him in the winter of 2006, and I went on a very spontaneous spring break trip in April of 2006, if I remember right, to the Biltmore Estate, and it was a bucket list trip that I'd always wanted to go there. We happened to stop there on the way to going to Myrtle Beach, and we got into the Biltmore Estate, and I wanted to see the pool, and it was not part of the handicap tour, and I didn't have a pain pill. So I decided to try and walk up the steps because I didn't want to miss the pool, and something miraculous happened that day. I was in that mansion for 7 hours walking around up and down stairs, and I didn't think about it because I just wanted to see it. And when I got back out to the vehicle, I wasn't in pain and I didn't take a pill. And that's when I realized the doctors made me think I needed the pills to feel better, but I didn't need any of it. I just needed to move.
Wow. And because of that experience combined with the knowledge you've been ever increasing and absorbing over the course of the last 20 years, you
Mm-hmm.
take a lot of what you've learned and you apply it to the people that walk through your doors. So I'm curious because we all collect knowledge and experience, and it becomes an amalgamation, and some will call it a method or a methodology. I kind of, some people will say I've got a method and I kind of shiver away from it because it's just really taking other people's advice and making sense of it myself. And I don't know if there's a method to it, but whether or not you call it that, where do you begin with your clients that come to see you? What's your starting point?
Yeah, the first thing that I do, I start watching them from the moment they get out of their car and walking in the door. My Gray Cook, Lee Burton, I've been certified with them since 2008, if I remember right. Uh, Gary Gray, in understanding how the body moves and pelvic girdle, the pelvic floor, how the diaphragm works, breath work. I've been through all of that kind of training. I'm just observing. I tell people all the time, I don't know what I'm looking for, but when I see it, I see it. It's like there's no, I don't put people through a functional movement screen. I used those principles in order to understand how we should be able to move. And when there's a lack of that type of movement, or individuals are moving too much in the same direction all the time, creating that fibrotic imbalance in the connective tissue and in the fascia, and they forget how to move with thoracic rotation, or their rounded shoulder posture. The biggest thing I'm seeing a lot of is a lot of people who stand long periods of days, they're standing with their legs locked out, which means that their pelvic girdle is completely disengaged and their spinal stabilizers are overfiring on the posterior aspect, and their abs are completely shut off, which means their upper body is rounding. So we have just increased the compression on the entire spine. But they don't even realize that they're turned off. But we have a lot of SI joint pain and a lot of spinal stress fractures. So right now I'm sitting on 13 spinal stress fractures in female athletes. specifically.
Wow.
So I see a lot of patterns, and those patterns are across the board, different for sports, different for gender, different for age groups, different for professions. But it starts from the moment they walk in the door, and there's things that I'm not really mindful of looking for. I just let it come to me. Like I said, the body tells us what it needs. But I tell people all the time, if I try and make you normal according to what the goniometer says you should be, or according to what the PT books or what, sports medicine tells us that your range of motion should be, if I'm working with professional athletes, if I make you normal, I take away your gift. Why on earth would I want to do that to you? But we just have
Hmm.
to find equilibrium and balance. Where is the disconnect? Why is your body feeling the way that it's feeling? There's a compensational pattern somewhere that is causing that pain signal to go off, and that pain signal is the compensational outlet. That's where the energy is being disconnected, and the body is having to work too hard at that point in order to make up for it. But where is the energy not entering the body from the start? So I don't go where the pain is. I go and start looking at the feet, because the feet is where everything enters. Like everything is entering through our feet from an energy standpoint. And if we are not loading on our feet properly from the very start, we're missing energy for free, and they have to generate the energy that they're not getting. So that's where I generally start. Is I evaluate by looking at them barefoot, and I work barefoot all day, every day. I look at their feet and I see where their feet are loaded, I have them tell me what they feel. And then I see, how the Achilles are lining up. I'm looking at tone from one calf to the other. I'm looking at knee rotation. I'm looking at all kinds of different things. But I'm not looking to make them normal, and I'm not looking to judge them on a 3-point scale. I'm wanting to figure out where's your pain and where is the disconnect, and is your core firing? Do you even know what the pelvic floor even means? Most athletes don't. So that's huge. But I'm also figuring out, it's a 30-question page. Just check yes or no boxes. Don't give me an explanation. Just check yes or no. But I ask them if they have pain in every orthopedic joint in the human body. I ask them if they're sleeping at night. I ask them if they have depression or anxiety. I ask them if they sit at a computer, if they drive all day. I'm asking them if they have a history or have current pain in certain areas. Have they had a head injury? Do they have epileptic behavior? There are a lot of questions that I ask that nobody else is asking. And I'm not asking where their pain is or to give me X's on a human body model, because I don't care. I want to know what these yes or no boxes are, because I see patterns. And the more boxes that I see checked off, the longer their appointment gets, because I have a lot of work to rebalance them out, because it's connective tissue lines, it's fascial slings that are imbalanced. And when I figure out where that disconnect is and I'm able to unlock that and remold their body by breaking down scar tissue that hasn't been addressed. People go through surgery and doctors don't prescribe physical therapy after a surgery. Here's your protocol, do these exercises at home. But for every scar, like Davis's law, like our body just spontaneously lays a blob of tissue wherever it goes, it goes. And if you're not
Let's talk
modeling
about
it,
that for a second.
that's
Let's
a
talk
huge
about
deal.
scars, because I think scars are one of the biggest and most underrated aspect of overall performance and movement. I mean, I have
Mm-hmm.
palpated scars and drawn them in certain directions where the tissue is happy to go, and suddenly the range of motion in somebody's shoulder has increased dramatically, or
Yep.
the sensation of pain in a certain area that was symptomatic is no longer there. And it's
Right.
not, or just having, I had one guy just go ahead and just put your fingers on that scar and go
Yep.
ahead and sit down. How does that feel? I don't have any more back pain. So
Very true.
I think that's something worth a short conversation. Well, actually, a long conversation. But
That's a whole nother
what's
podcast.
right? Wouldn't it be? But let's talk
It
about
is.
Star for a second, because I don't think the listening audience, and and for that matter, a lot of our colleagues don't take scars into consideration. What's
It
your
is a big
take?
deal. Yeah, it is a big deal. That's why I invented my own cupping system. Cupping is a plunger for scar tissue. So wherever you have a scar, first things first, if you have an ACL tear and you have a scar from an ACL reconstruction, that athlete has just lost their identity, because they have a blown out knee and their dreams just went right down the tubes. And they're going to wonder for the rest of their life if they're ever going to be the same. Had they had the surgery or not had the surgery, they're ever going to wonder if they could have done something different had I not been on the field, had I not been in that play. So with every scar, this is really important, Rocky. With every scar, there is trauma on that scar. There's emotional trauma. There's spiritual trauma. There's mental distress behind that scar, and no scar is too old to go back into discovery. So
No,
where every scar is, there's a story behind it, and that's where the mental coaching with what I do comes in. So I mentally coach every person I touch because
I
if
basically
we
say
don't
when it
get to the
comes,
root of that, we've got a big problem.
I usually say to people when it comes to scars or injuries that haven't been addressed and reintegrated into the physical, emotional, mental triad there, that it's
Mm-hmm.
living at that moment in time. So
Yep.
if you had an accident in 2005, your body, your mind, your mental state has advanced on to 2025, but that area in your body is
It's
still
stuck.
back in 2005 because
Yep.
it's on the same nerve feedback loop and you
Yep.
haven't offered it any alternative but what it's used to. But what you do is you give it resources, you give it an alternative,
Yep.
and then you let the nervous system and the rest of the living organism decide what do you want to do with that.
Right. Well, and the biggest problem is if you have a scar on your torso anywhere, if you have a scar on your central meridian, that is a much bigger problem because your core power vacuum is your diaphragm to your pelvic floor, and that falls the central meridian. And the central meridian is the number one meridian for anxiety and depression. So if you have that cut into,
Open heart
you have
surgery.
just shut down the entire meridian highway. And what most people don't realize, the first thing that happens when you have an incision or a cut on your body is your brain shuts that highway off, electrically speaking, and it doesn't
Yes.
turn it back on until
No.
somebody else teaches you how or does it for you. I use acupuncture to do it. So I actually do a scar release using acupuncture, using a microcurrent and driving the microcurrent across a needle point between kind of creating a zigzag pattern over the scar.
Mm,
So it's kind of like taking a sewing needle through a piece of cloth that has no puncture to it. And if you hold that piece of cloth up to a light bulb, you can't see light radiating through it. But if you take a needle or a pair of scissors and you poke a bunch of holes through it, and you hold that same piece of cloth up to the light bulb, you can see light radiating through it in little flashes. That piece of cloth is scar tissue, and that light is your brain trying to communicate through it. It can't, so it has to reroute around it. And scar tissue doesn't have blood flow, so it's basically crap tissue until you mold it to allow blood flow to travel through it. But it's just a giant patch, and it adheres to other surrounding structures, which interferes with how the fascia matrix moves together. So there's a compensatory pattern that comes from all different directions, interfering because of that scar continuing to fuse itself to other surrounding structures. So the muscles can't fire like they're supposed to. So it creates
oh
a
yeah.
whole compensatory pattern, but a neurological disconnect because there's no electrical highway running through that tissue until you create it.
I gotta say, I have experienced this first person, not in my own body, but a client came in, and I write about it in the book there, and he he had hernia repair at between the ages of 2 and 3 years old, and nobody did anything about the scar, of course. And then what did that develop? It developed improper gait pattern. It developed improper pelvic positioning, which then his brain, trying to reorganize and manage the mass of his body and all these segments, created a scoliotic shift. So 10 years later in middle school, he was diagnosed with scoliosis. So then he was taken to every scoliosis expert around, and they all focused on his spine, and it just continued to get worse to the point where he couldn't get on the floor and play with his kids at the age of 30 something. And
Mm-hmm.
sure enough, there were no fractures. He had never experienced any accidents in his life, no major trauma or anything. The only thing we could date it back to was that hernia repair. And this is the guy that I said, put your fingers on that hernia scar and go ahead and stand on up. And for the first time, he didn't feel his back pain. So we
Yeah,
knew that was
it's
the end right
connected.
there. So you
Yeah,
work on that. And as soon as he started working on that, things happened. His spine didn't go back straight. Of course, that's going to take some time,
yeah,
but
it's still
you
possible.
find your way in.
Yeah. No, that's one of the questions on my questionnaire is where are the scars on your body and do you have tattoos? Because a tattoo is a scar.
Yeah.
You actually use a
Or
needle puncture. Yeah.
or it's hiding. You might notice this in terms of pattern.
Yeah.
What I notice is that people that have previous injuries put the tattoo on that region, almost like a
Right.
band-aid to cover over the injury.
Right. Yeah. That's the first thing. If I've got somebody with chronic pain, or somebody who is dealing with a lot of emotional trauma, I always go through and do a release on all their scars first, and then I go through and address the equilibrium of the rest of the body through the fascia. And
Love
that's
it.
why I invented my own cupping system, because cupping can release a scar faster than anything. And the cupping system I invented, 5 different sizes of cups, and I did it with the intention of not teaching PTs, ATs, chiropractors how to use it. It's to create protocols for me to send them to you, and for you to be able to work on yourself at home, or to teach your wife how to put them on you. And these are the movements, or the mobility circuits, or the movement patterns I want you to do if you have this list of symptoms and this area of pain. And oh, and by the way, let's use cupping for a warm up, because what does cupping do? It brings oxygenated blood flow to a joint. So if we have Major League Baseball pitchers, or we got NFL quarterbacks that are putting the cups on in a blanket pattern, on the pec, on the shoulder, and rotator cuff, in all those areas, and I have you go through movement patterns, take the cups off. Now you can throw the ball like a rocket without any kind of restriction whatsoever. And now we have oxygenated blood flow, which means you're going to throw more powerful longer, because you're not going to fatigue the same. So there's 2 sets going on here with the cupping system I built. And it's not with the intention of putting it in clinics. It's with the intention of being able to help anybody and everybody, and teaching them how to help themselves, because there's always so many of us that can work with you one on one in a room, but you can work on yourself. I mean, they don't cause harm. I mean, there's a lot of practitioners, so long as you don't put it over your butthole, right?
That's it. I love it. Okay, so
Yeah,
is this some of the stuff we got to talk about Perform Better, because
yeah,
will be your second year
that's what's
presenting.
rolling into it.
That's it. Oh, beautiful. Because last year you were
Yeah,
in Chicago. This year you're going to be down in Long Beach, which
yep.
is July, right around the 16th and 17th there at the Long Beach Conference Center, which is an awesome place. You got to take a trip over and see the Queen Mary, and and have a good time in the Long Beach area. But tell me a little bit. Give us a sneak peek as to what you're going to be presenting. What's the title of your topic?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually have to pull it up, because I did a similar topic last year, and I just asked Chris. I said, "Hey, can I do the exact same presentation with a little tweaks?" Because we had so much feedback. I mean, I had 3 people who cried in my session
Yeah.
just listening, because it was so life-changing for them to learn in the lecture, and then when they actually experienced what they saw on the hands-on, everybody missed the social in my group, because they wanted to see the outcome of the hands-on, and I didn't realize I was out of time, so we went over like 45 minutes over in the ballroom, not realizing the party was going on. But life-changing. And Chris said we haven't had anybody who has had so many phone calls and emails about one presentation that was life-changing by being in the room until you came in after the pandemic hit. So like plan on discovering more and more of that. So my talk is about understanding, or finding the magic within the fascia, and knowing how to tap into it, to pamper it, uh, so that you can unlock pain-free performance. So it's knowing how to hack into the fascial connective matrix, knowing how to pamper it, knowing what pisses it off, and how to help yourself in order to age backwards and perform better without pain.
I love this. I mean, we may use different words, but we express the same concepts behind those words, and it's just
Yeah.
a joy to hear other people doing the same thing. Because I mean, for myself, growing up in the gym with barbells and dumbbells, it was pretty straightforward, and this is the way. And you didn't look outside to the or open up other doors until later, and then boy, I didn't realize how many doors there were to open and learn from. And then as you do that, a lot of your preconceived ideas start to be questioned, and they shake the firmament of your understanding. And I love it when that happens. And
Yeah.
so now, like, when you're talking about the emotional portion, I'm reminded of my time with Tom Myers in, I think it was Berkeley. He came out probably 15 or 20 years ago to do the anatomy trains for manual and movement therapists, I think is what it was called at the time. And we were doing all these posture assessments, which I at that time was quite familiar with. But before we got underway, he said, "Okay, I don't want you to look at the joint so much as I want you to look at the person and
Mm-hmm.
know that they are holding who they are in their frame. We might call it body language for kind of an easy explanation, but honestly, as soon as I heard that, the way in which I look at someone changed at that moment instantly.
Yep.
So now talk about patterns. Talk about looking at somebody's structure and seeing another level of them. And it's just remarkable. And I sound like I've been living in Santa Cruz, California, smoking whatever's legal out here, but it's not really the case. It's just well, I have been living there, and who knows, maybe back then I partake. But these days I look and it's almost like Avatar. I see you,
Yeah.
and you really mean it. It's just like it's such a different level of understanding and comprehension. So I guess my question, Amber, is this: when did that moment hit you? When did you actually see somebody? And I know it happened. I
Yeah.
can guarantee from everything you've told me, there was a time you saw somebody, but you really saw them.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you, I did a mentorship with Dr. Robert Schleip, one of the top
Ah,
scientists in fascia.
sure.
I did that a couple of years ago, and I was working with a young man. I mean, I have seen people for who they are inside with their body language for years, but the tipping point for me, I knew, Rocky, what I was seeing on my table. I knew I could feel it. I could imagine it. I could see it in my own imagination, but I didn't have the clinical proof to prove it. Like I knew, like
Right, right.
all these things that I was doing to people during the pandemic when nobody else would work on them. That's when I knew I had a gift. I've been doing it a long time. I just didn't know that I truly had the gift to do it until they were rejected from all these other clinics, and they had been to all these other clinics, and they came to see me, and it only took one appointment after years of appointments. And I'm like, this is like, I'm not, that's why people started calling me a magic lady. But I thought it's not this easy because it's easy for me. Like I, I don't have to think about it. I can do this stuff in my
Just
sleep.
look for what's missing. Just find
Just
what's
look for
missing.
what's missing. But yes, but I did the mentorship with Dr. Robert Schleip, and he provided me his clinical research. And I saw the videos and I saw the data, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is what I needed, because everybody thought I was crazy for like telling what I was trying to tell and saying what I was saying and seeing what I was seeing. I was working with a young man. His name is Lucas Grounds, and he is a seven-time national champion in motorbike racing, and had signed a contract to sign full to ride full time, fully sponsored at the age of 15. And he was involved in a motorbike accident, not race related. Um, right after he had signed this contract, it ended up in breaking his back at T12, and
Mm.
no spinal cord interruption, no spinal cord injury, just T12 fracture, and has been a paraplegic since. And they
Huh.
ended up in doing a thoracic fusion in order to they like put the plates and screws in to stabilize the fractured area. But he was told that he didn't need a walker because he needed to get used to living life in the wheelchair, even though he did
Ah.
not have interruption of the spinal cord. And so his parents advocated for him, and he ended up in going to NeuroHope in Indy, trying to learn how to move with the assistance of robotics and different types of technology that insurance does not pay for, and lots of fundraisers to pay for his treatments. And he was a year and a half post injury, in which his family called me and said, okay, like, and I had watched his story from afar, but I didn't want to knock on their door and be like, hey, let me give it a chance, right? Because I really didn't think it was the right timing. I didn't think that that's the time that God wanted me to work on him. So I waited for them, and they contacted me. And the first time that he came in, I told his mom on the phone. I said, I don't know what I can do to help him, but I know I can help him. I don't know what I'm going to find until I get my hands on him. But I said, what is his goal? And his goal was to walk on stage to accept his high school diploma, and we had a year to get it done with a 3% chance, with a 3% chance of doing this. And he comes in, and I meet him, and they bring me an entire file of paperwork. And I said, I really don't need all the paperwork. I just need to know I need to know what they've done to his lower body. Because what I do know is 80% of our small nerve and our large nerve cell bundles only originate on the skin, on the bottom of our feet, and on the palms of our hands. And if we can excite those nerve cells, and if we can reconnect the electrical highways from the brain to those cells where information is entering the body and exciting, the connective tissue and the muscles, that is the only chance we have at getting hypertrophy in the lower body and getting the nerve tissue to regenerate and getting him a chance to getting vertical without assistance. Nobody had worked on his lower body because he didn't need his legs because he was paralyzed. And I said, well, I got to work on his legs. So the first time, Rocky, that I touched his feet, his body moved, his legs and his feet moved, and his parents broke down crying. I still get chills thinking about it. I'm getting goosebumps now talking about it.
I love
And
it.
they said, how did you just do that? And I said, I just gave his body some love. I loved his body. I listened
Cuddle it.
and observed what his body needs. And his body needs touch. His lower body needs touch. And we have to work through the scar tissue, because when you're not moving, your body becomes molded into dough that has no hydration. We've got to get fluid down into these limbs. We've got to get connections going. And so I worked on him. I started naming every Thursday after him, Lucas Thursday. And I worked on him every Thursday for 3 hours. He wanted to come in more often. I'm like, dude, like, you're going to 7 therapy
That's a
appointments a
lot.
week. You've got to live outside of your diagnosis. You have got to be a human. You got to be a spirit. You got to go do things you love to do and be a kid. Forget the medical. Like, just go be you, and let's see each other once a week. And you really need to back off on your other therapy appointments too, because you need to live. Like, don't conform to your diagnosis. Because he'd been doing this for a year and a half. And so he was exhausted. And so he walked on stage to accept his high school diploma in front of an audience of 6,000 people on national television.
Wow. Beautiful.
Using a walker.
Love it.
But I
Oh my
remember you
gosh.
being on that phone call, on that Zoom call with Robert, and I'm going to get emotional thinking about it. I walked into that room because he was waiting for me, and I ran out of time. I was late getting off the call with Dr. Schleip, and I walked in there and I said, Lucas, buddy, I said, I know exactly why your body is reacting the way it is, and I just got the clinical proof to prove it. And I've been waiting
Awesome.
for decades for that information to not be called a quack. And I walked in and I said, I know what we are going to do to get you where we need to be. And it was like light bulbs, fireworks, because I knew what I was experiencing. I just didn't have the clinical research to prove it, and that's all I
Yep.
needed in order to bring it full circle. So I've been a lab scientist on every human body for a very, very long time. So it was, but being able to clinically prove it, to validating it, to making it sense with all the doctors, because they didn't have access to it, and they thought I was nuts. Like, so now it all,
I
but
love it.
I saw it in my head before I ever met Dr. Schleip. So
Uh-huh.
it's cool.
And it's unbelievable. Amber, we've got to do this again. I'm
Yeah,
just
you
up
got
against
it.
the clock right now.
I totally
And
get it.
I am and just loving our conversation. And I honestly can't wait for when we have some events where we're in the same room, because it's going to talk about fireworks. We're just going to, I mean, whether we geek out at feet, which for the listening audience, they already know that
Yeah.
I've got issues. I mean,
Oh,
I've got a
well,
love
I just
affair.
need to fly. I just need to fly out and work with you.
I have probably got my hands in 2014. I began learning how to do open chain foot mobilization, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
had a goal of 1,000 feet by the end of that year, and that was and I achieved it 1 month a little bit later, which was January 2015. So here we are over 10 years later, and the rate with which I get my hands on feet hasn't really slowed down. So we can definitely geek out on that. But hey, if people want
Yeah.
to follow you on social media, give me a shout out. Where can they go?
Yeah. KKSMAGIK. KKS Magik. I'm known as the Magic Lady. MAGIK. It's an acronym. Motivation, acceptance, greatness, gifts, inspiration, kindness is the acronym for Magic. It's motivating you to being a better version of yourself by accepting you right where you're at. Because everybody I meet is in pain and they're at the lowest point in their life. They've lost their identity. So accepting you right where you're at, no judgment, recognizing that you already have gifts and greatness inside of you, and inspiring you to like come out of that shell by using them, by just being kind.
Oh, great
That's what I'm all
closing
about.
words.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So
Thank
yeah,
you so
people
much.
can text me directly if they want to get a hold of me. Social media, like I said, I'm all over the place, but 317-446-7971 is my direct phone contact if you want to reach out for conversation. But KKS Magic is my website, and that's my handle for all my social media.
Well, that was a dang good hour. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Man, Amber's got some really cool insight and information. Be sure to check out her website and check out Perform Better. Remember, we've got a 3-day summit either in Providence, Rhode Island, Chicago, Illinois, or Long Beach, California, all summer long. CEUs, networking, and a whole bunch more. And then the NSCA National Conference, again, Kansas City, Missouri, July 16th to the 19th. And senior online right now. Check out my website, rockysnyder.com. And while you're there, go to the shop there. You might check out this book called Return to Center, which is all about strength training to realign the body, recover from pain, and achieve optimal performance. We'll see you next week.